Hi there, April the 29th. I've just come up to have a look at the onions. It's 9 days after we've planted them. I've probably been up here about 6 times, something like that, to check that the birds haven't uprooted them. Every time I did come, I found about 10 that they had. So I simply planted them back in and they've all rooted. So I don't have any now that are uprooted. They're all there, all growing. As you can see, most of them have got shoots on, so they're going to be pretty unstoppable now. And hopefully, in a couple of weeks, they'll have shoots on of about 8 to 10 inches. While we're here, I think it'd be a good idea to talk about weeds, especially in the onion beds. Every time soil is disturbed, thousands and thousands of weed seeds are brought up from the lower depths that have lain dormant for years. As an example, a dock seed will survive up to 120 years in the soil before it's disturbed and brought up and allowed to germinate. So you can imagine how many weed seeds there are. And it can present a real problem sometimes. Not so much a problem in beds that have been prepared and left empty, awaiting sort of later crops later on in the season, such as Brussels sprouts or leeks. Because the gardener has plenty of time and opportunity to get rid of the seedlings. Every time a bed grows the seedlings, the gardener can swiftly go over with a rake or a hoe. You can do it really quickly because there are no precious crops in there to damage, so it doesn't really matter how fast he sort of goes over it. So by the time crops are planted, he's probably got rid of about 6 generations of weeds. As long as it's done on a hot day, the weed seedlings will go back down into the soil and rot down. As you can see here, that's what they look like. So if you imagine going over those on a hot day, you bring them straight out while they're young and tender, and it's not a problem. It is a problem, however, with onions. Onions are the first crop to go in, so you don't get a chance to do that. Excuse me. And and they don't have the broad foliage that a cabbage would have, for instance. So even more soil is exposed to the light, and even more seeds will germinate. It can be a real problem in onions because if weeds are allowed to take over, then the onions stand a chance of becoming mildewed, and the mildew will go down into the bulbs and render them useless to store, probably even useless to eat as well. And another problem with onions is hoeing. You can't hoe so close to the bulbs because you could pierce them and make them also useless to store. You'd have to eat them straight away if you did that, and you probably wouldn't even know that you'd done it. So therefore making the onion useless. So the best possible thing to do in onion beds is to hand pull around the bulbs so they don't get, so the moisture isn't retained around them and they don't stay wet. And also, like I've done here, is to interplant lettuce in the middle of them to shade the ground, which will give them a helping hand, and you can harvest the lettuce eventually anyway, so it won't sort of make them wet. Anyway, that's it for now. I hope that makes sense. We will explain in more detail as the season goes on, and I will demonstrate everything I've just said to you. So just a little something for you to think about. Okay.